Welcome to Cracking the Code, a citywide workshop on accessory dwelling units in the urban core. Due to popularity, we are holding this course twice. My name is Cassidy Smith-Tolliver, and I am a community organizer for the Neighborhood Alliance of Central Oklahoma. I'll be moderating the 2 evenings of code update discussions. Also in attendance with me is Georgie Rasco, Executive Director for the Neighborhood Alliance. As you may know, Oklahoma City is hard at work on Plan OKC, the first new comprehensive plan since 1977, which serves as a guide for policy, infrastructure, and planning decisions for years to come, while also providing the path to a better quality of life and sustainable, efficient, and successful development. When it comes to accessory dwellings, the city is making a significant effort to take this discussion seriously and make sure that this code proposal fits the needs of everyone in Oklahoma City. As you know, we have a housing shortage and it's detrimental to the economics of the city in other ways. We must do something, and we aren't saying that this something is the something exactly. These workshops, though, are your chance to ask questions and provide feedback. Before we dive into the presentation, we want to show the results of a quick 3-question survey attendees were offered each evening prior to the presentation. On Tuesday, March 12th, 66.3% of attendees said they had a good understanding of what an accessory dwelling was, with 28.7% saying they did not and 5% who were unsure. When asked if with the only knowledge they had currently, they were in favor or against the proposed code update, 38% said that they were in favor, 10% said they were against, and 52% said they were unsure. Finally, 43% of attendees said that there was already an accessory dwelling unit on their block, with 57% saying there was not. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, March 13th, 56% of attendees said they had a good understanding currently of what an accessory dwelling was, with 11% saying they did not, and 33% who were not sure. When asked if with the only knowledge they had currently, they were in favor or against the proposed code update, 33% of attendees said they were in favor, and 67% said they were unsure. Finally, 44% of attendees said there was already an ADU on their block, while 56% said there was not. Our presenters for these Cracking the Code workshops on accessory dwellings are city staff members Lisa Chronister and Marilyn Allen. Lisa Chronister, FAIA AICP Lead AP, is the Assistant Director of the Oklahoma City Planning Department, where she leverages her architectural expertise to influence public decision-making regarding development projects. Her credentials include Fellow of the American Institute of Architects and is a certified planner by the American Planning Association. Marilyn Allen is a program planner for the City of Oklahoma City. Marilyn has been in the planning department for 5 years. Before joining the City of Oklahoma City staff, she worked in Austin, Texas, where she spent 3 years on the staff code update team in that city, focusing on parts of the code related to open spaces. Marilyn is the staff liaison for the city's process of updating its development codes and subdivision regulations. She has a master's degree in community and regional planning from the University of Texas at Austin and is a certified planner by the American Planning Association and the Congress for New Urbanism. Without further ado, we will now turn it over to them.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And we have a lot of information to talk to you about regarding accessory dwellings. If you don't catch it all the first time, the recording and the slide deck will be made available after the meeting. So we'll go over, what is an accessory dwelling? What are we even talking about when we say accessory dwellings? We'll go over some recent survey results we have where we polled people on their opinions about accessory dwellings and some other resources we have that support the city, including accessory dwellings in its zoning code. We'll recap our comprehensive plan and how that affects how the new provisions to allow accessory dwellings, how that affects those. We'll look at some details of the proposed ordinance, and then we will hear your questions. So this is slightly different informal poll question from what Cassidy asked. So have you heard of an accessory dwelling? Just informal show of hands or thumbs up. Have you heard that term? Seemed like from the poll results, it was about 50-50 in terms of who was familiar with it. So accessory dwelling, it's, the basics are that it's a small secondary living unit allowed in a residential area. And our existing zoning code does not have a definition of accessory dwellings. So if we are to allow them, the first thing we have to do is to define them. And so the key aspect of it is a complete independent living facilities. That means there's a place to cook, a place to bathe, a place to sleep. And part of why that's important is people would ask, well, how is that different from my work shed? Or how is that different from my she shed? Well, the difference is it's got facilities to do all these things. You don't have to run back to the main house to cook or to use the bathroom. It's all contained in the unit. So this is our proposed definition, just as a starting place to work from. And if you're, one of the poll questions was, is there an accessory dwelling on your block? And there was half said yes, half said no. Accessory dwellings are a very common historic building type. And you probably, if you live in the core, you probably pass by one every day. These are actual examples of accessory dwellings in Oklahoma City. Garage apartments are probably the most common type that you could think of. They're also known as granny flats or mother-in-law suites. We have searched for a more politically correct term, but once we say granny flat, everybody seems to know what we're talking about. So garage apartments, sometimes they're 2 stories, sometimes they're 1 story. On some of these images, especially the one in the lower middle, you can barely see that there's one in the backyard. And so one reason accessory dwellings are a common historic building type is there are many benefits to them. This is one reason we're looking at how can we allow them in our code. They expand housing capacity, as Cassidy mentioned. We're in a housing crisis. We need more places for people to live. How can we leverage our existing neighborhoods to provide that? Accessory dwellings, because they are small, they can be an affordable option for people to live, especially in neighborhoods that they might otherwise be priced out of. People can be priced, the neighborhoods that we all know and love and live in, they're desired because they are close to transit, because they have tree-lined streets, because they have sidewalks, because they're close to services, easy to get around. They're, aesthetically pleasing because they're historic. They're cool, and that's what drives up their value. That's what prices people out. But accessory dwellings may provide an affordable way for people to get the advantages of those neighborhoods because they're less expensive. They can also support home ownership. Like maybe I can't afford the big house in the nice neighborhood all by myself, but maybe if I have a garage apartment I can rent out that can help me make my monthly payment, help me build wealth. There's social benefits that people gain from living in different neighborhoods. Social benefits include multi-generational housing. Like, let's say, if you have raised your family in the big house, but now you're retired and the kids are moved out, maybe you want to live in the accessory dwelling and rent out the bigger house. Maybe you want to, and we have talked to a specific property owner who's doing this. His daughter and her family are going to move into the big house, and mom and dad are going to move to the accessory dwelling. So they can, still live very close, live in community, have active engagement with each other, but still have private living spaces. And then accommodating existing non-conforming dwellings. I showed these images. Some of these were approved through SPUDs. We'll get to that in a minute. Through zoning. Some just happened to be, and I don't know if they got legal approval or not, but I do know there are a lot of existing, we call them non-conforming accessory dwellings. And if they're not legal, if they don't legally exist, then they can't be improved, they can't be expanded, and other changes that would help keep them active for the future. So it's important that we allow them. So those are the benefits. So you might say, well, why don't we have them? Why aren't they allowed, Lisa? Well, our existing zoning code for R1 single family residential, which is probably most of where everybody lives, is either R1 single family or R2 double family, two family. That's usually a duplex, not detached structures. So single family districts are defined by having one dwelling, and that one dwelling located on a lot or site that is unoccupied by any other dwelling. So you can only have one on a site, and that's what impedes us from allowing accessory dwellings now without rezoning. So I mentioned, so we feel that we have good support for accessory dwellings in both our comprehensive plan and several surveys. We'll go through these, some of these in more detail. Plan OKC is our comprehensive plan. It was adopted in 2015, and it's been amended here and there along the way ever since. But it calls for increasing density where appropriate places for density are places that are already served by city services, places that already have water, sewer, roads, transit, parks, schools, retail nodes. And those are the best places to grow density, because that means we're not spending money to build those things. They already exist, and they already have in most cases, plenty of capacity to support more homes, more people. Improve a community health by having more dense, walkable places. We all get healthy and when we're less dependent on driving. The plan also talks about decreasing the number of abandoned homes. Allowing accessory dwellings may help that. And then, like I mentioned, housing choices for all stages of life. There may be people who they want to stay in the neighborhood they've lived in for years, but the house now is just too big, or it's on 2 levels and they can't navigate stairs. Whereas their option to stay in the neighborhood that they have invested in and love for a long time. And there are specific, very, very specific policies that say the code needs to be revised to allow accessory dwellings. Then, in support of the code update project, in 2022, we did several surveys, one asking if people would be interested in living in an ADU, and almost 42% of people said they would be interested. But even for people who weren't interested, over 80% said it's fine if the house next to me has an ADU. Another reason to believe we have support for pursuing accessory dwellings is the number of rezonings recently that have been sought to allow ADUs. So a SPUD, a SPUD, Simplified Planned Unit Development, that's an individualized rezoning where for us, any given site, the rules of development for that site are tailored to that site. So it covers things like the use, what you can do on it, how tall your building can be, what your setbacks are, how much parking you have to have, all of these things, and it's customized. But it's right now in many places, it's the only way people can get their legally compliant accessory dwelling, because it's not allowed in R1. So you have to create this whole miniature zoning district to allow it. So we already know what I think Marilyn said at the last planning commission, there were 3 of these applications. There's applications every planning commission meeting, and planning commission meets twice a month, except for the summers. So we know the demand is there because we're getting the applications. And from those applications, we know what people are needing in terms of height, lot coverage, setback, and some other details that we've been able to capture in our proposed criteria for new ADU.
And Lisa, part of this slide where you see all the blue letters is because, so each time we do this, we're giving different people different things as far as how they get this on their lot. And it's getting confusing, because everyone has a different allowance.
Yeah, we're like, wouldn't it be more effective, efficient for everybody if we all, part of the reason people are having to negotiate different rules is because there are no rules. But if we set some rules and made them universally applicable, then it would save applicants time, it would save residents time from having to pay attention to rezonings, because there would be this standard set of rules that everybody knows about. Yeah, thanks, Marilyn. Good point. So other cities, lots of other cities allow accessory dwellings. These are just some of our peer cities. So a lot of them allow them. Most of them set some sort of maximum size. Some require parking, some don't require parking. So we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk a little bit more about Plan OKC, or comprehensive plan, and how, because the comprehensive plan affects our approach to the new zoning code, and it's elements of that we are relying on as we craft the ordinance for accessory dwellings. So this is the land use typology area map, the LUTA map from the comprehensive plan. It's not the zoning map. It's a broad vision of the city and how the city should develop. And what it recognizes is, Oklahoma City is so big. We have agricultural areas around the edges, and as you get closer to downtown, you get more development, more density, until you get to like the purple inset is downtown. And so shown another way, so our rural areas are mostly natural areas, not very many buildings, not even very many services. There's not very many buses going out to the country roads, but areas like downtown are heavily reliant on public transit, sidewalks, and they're designed for large concentrations of people. So how this is significant for the code update is, right now, we were talking about R1 single family zoning. Right now, R1 zoning is the same. The requirements are the same for any of the LUDAs. They're the same for rural, they're the same for suburban, with some exceptions, same for urban, but they're different places. So shouldn't they have different rules that are more context sensitive? Yes, they should. So the new code will be organized around these differences. So each LUDA, so the different colors here, the green, the light yellow, the gold, the purple, all of those will have uh, different standards for their height, their streetscape, their setback, because they are different areas with different needs. And so the last several years, we've been working on this gold inset area. So roughly from Northwest 63rd down to Southwest 59th, between I-44 and I-35. That's been the concentration of our work. We call it, it's called the UM, the urban medium, because it, and the comprehensive plan calls for it to densify. Again, because it already has all of the infrastructure, all of the services, all the things you need to accommodate people, and it works both ways. I mean, so it's the systems can accommodate more people than other systems like retail, like schools. They need the people there to make them successful. So in the one of the new districts in the new code is called the urban medium UMSD single dwelling. And it's essentially proposed as the replacement for the existing R1. And if I know some people on the call were in some focus groups we held over the past couple of years about the new zones. And we showed this graphic, and what it shows is even the R1 zone in the new code, the new R1 is going to have more density. One way to do that is to allow accessory dwellings. So because we had already done so much research into the urban medium area, because we had already worked out kind of the locations and size and other metrics for accessory dwellings in the new code, we felt we were well positioned, we staff felt we were well positioned to accelerate the provision for accessory dwellings and allow them in the existing code, because the adoption of the new code is still some time away, because it's a very complicated, very big project. And we're like, hey, what can we do to allow accessory dwellings now? We've already figured out so much about them. So with that, I'll pass it to Marilyn, and she will take us through the conditions of the new ordinance.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking your time out of your evening to hear about accessory dwellings. It's really important that everyone understand what this means if it were adopted. And so, like Lisa said, right now we're just considering the urban medium and urban high areas. Lisa's going to show a map. And so only the dark brown and light brown areas where this would be allowed now. And later we'll look at other parts of the city to determine if other parts of the city want them. And we've had support for them out there too, even on like 5-acre lots in the agricultural districts. Why can't my children have a house out here too? So we'll be looking at all the areas, but we're just starting with this now because we do have that demand, like Lisa was saying, and it's going to drive us crazy if we do it lot by lot. So why those areas? So sort of recap of what you already heard. Number one, a lot of these areas already have these things, these garage apartments or whatever we want to call them. Sometimes it's inside the house. It's in the same structure as the main house. And they're not supported by the existing code. But what happens if they're called legally non-conforming, they can't be expanded. They really can't be maintained. And, we want them to be able to be used structures, not just falling down structures in the backyards, right? So that's one reason. The second one is, like Lisa said, to meet our plan advocacy goals, less driving, more walking, And we want that in the UM area. I think okay, yeah.
Sorry.
We want that in those, the light brown and dark brown areas, because they're, the streets are more on a grid, there's more bus service, there's more bike lanes. And you could have like a shorter walk to the store. Once you go out to the urban, what we call urban low, in the rural areas, you got to have a long drive to the store. So it's not really possible to walk. And then this spud thing, we're doing it case by case, and there's just no uniformity and predictability either for neighbors or for developers. They don't know none of us know what's going to come out of the box at Planning Commission and City Council. So why don't we just, codify it and be on our way. So it won't be the Wild West show. There would be rules to these things. And so what we're saying is that if you are in a zone that's zoned R1, R2, R3, R4, that has a single family use right now, you can add accessory structure on the back. If you're in an R2 and you have like a duplex already, you cannot also add an accessory dwelling to the back under this proposal. So it's just, two houses on a lot. If you already have two, you're maxed out in R2. R4 allows like multifamily, so it's a little bit different story. More dwellings are allowed. Like R4 is like an apartment complex, can be, or it can be like a quadplex. So we're not adding ADUs to quadplexes and triplexes. They already have, the density we want now. So, and only one per lot, and it can be a detached dwelling like you see in the back there. That's a detached one, or you could build it inside your house and have a separate entrance for the person who lives there, which is not allowed now. You cannot subdivide the property and sell off the back part to the person. We're not, in the code update, we're trying to make ways to have smaller lots, but that's not what we're doing now. So you will not be able to divide off into a tiny lot for that person in that structure. They're going to be, maximum height of 25 feet. In the R1, you can have a maximum height on your front dwelling of 35 feet. So the idea is that these would be shorter and not, overtake the block. The setbacks would be whatever the R1, R2, R3, and R4 say, same, except that like that structure in the back that's shown on this picture, I'm not sure that it's 5 feet from the neighbor's property line, which it's supposed to be. And that would prevent it from any changes happening to that structure. It would be one of those legally non-conforming. If that wasn't 5 feet, that might be 5 feet. I'm not sure, but if it weren't, then you're able to, the proposal would allow that one to be changed or expanded, or, let's say the garage is just falling down and you need to build a new one, that's fine. And there are some weird, you might have seen like some lots where the house is, the current existing house is way at the back. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those. They're not that many, but what we want to do is sort of grandfather that in as the accessory dwelling, and then you can build a new dwelling in front of it, because it's like that dwelling took up the space of where the accessory dwelling could be, but whatever dwelling is built in front would be the principal dwelling, the new front. You have to still meet the 25-foot setbacks and all that, but so you would be able to fill in a lot has a bunch of room in the front. So that would be allowed. And then, so this is kind of the hardest part of it, is that this issue of lot coverage, because right now in an R1 zone, you can only have 50% of the lot covered in stuff, buildings, paving, parking, and then the other 50% has to be, grass or what can be referred to as open area, right? So we want to maintain that. And so we put some rules in there. I think you saw some of the other cities had like the accessory dwelling cannot exceed so many square feet. And we played around with that, but then we realized that it depends on your lot size, how much space you can take up. So you're still meet that 50%, but in addition, all of your ground floor buildings cannot exceed 15% of your lot. Most of your lots, I would say, are 7,000 square feet. Some are a little bit larger. So 15%. So that'd be like 1,000 square feet on the ground floor for all your accessory structures. Is what you would be able to have. So if you had no other accessory structures, like no garages, no sheds, other stuff, then you could have about 1,000 square feet on the ground floor. And depending on how big your house is, depends on how much your ground floor takes up. And why are we so worried about lot coverage? Well, we just really don't want to float away when it rains. We don't want flooding. We need to maintain some areas where the rain can seep into the ground, right? Basically. And so we don't want you just paving over your whole lot and everybody, go ahead. No, we don't want that. So that's one of the main reasons. The other reason, though, why we didn't pick a number is because there are a lot of people who are saying they want to accommodate seniors as they age in place. And seniors often can't have a second floor. So they want to be able to spread out a little bit. So they kind of want flexibility for what they need. So this is how we were trying to accommodate that. And I think the next slide, you can still have a carport, a porch, and a deck. That doesn't count towards your lot coverage. You could have a balcony like this in this picture, but it has to face the interior of the lot. We don't want you looking over other people on your side yards or your backyards. And then no rooftop decks. We've had a lot of discussions about rooftop decks and they don't seem to be too popular. So we don't need them on these. That's what I was explaining about this. This is a perfect example. And the next slide. So what about parking? In R1, you have to have at least 2 parking spaces per dwelling. And so we debated on whether this extra unit would require parking. And so we said, well, a lot of times in zoning codes, they'll say, well, if you're within a quarter mile of something, that you can walk there. Like most people will not walk beyond a quarter mile to somewhere, which is about a 10-minute walk. So we said, well, how about if you're within a quarter mile, you don't have to have a parking spot. But then we did the analysis and we see the whole almost, except for where you see the gray areas, those are not within quarter mile of a bus or a bike lane. But everything else is within a quarter mile of the, they could take a bus, they could bike, they could walk. So we just decided to have no on-site parking. That's, up for debate, but that's how we're going to propose. That's how the proposal that the staff is putting forward. We can talk about that. And what about HP? We tell HP we're stealing your stuff because a lot of this was kind of the traditional form in the early days. Is you had a house that was built to the depth of the lot, and then you had like a carriage house in the back for horses or whatever, and maybe like another dwelling on top or something. And so this is what we want to encourage in other parts of town, but the HP base zone, those neighbors are not particularly in favor of more of those. So we're still talking with them. So, but we're not proposing that for this to be allowed there right now. Is there another bullet,
No,
Lisa?
no. Marilyn, did you make clear? So historic landmark districts like Jefferson Park, Paseo, they have a historic overlay, but they still have base zoning that is often R1. So,
Sometimes, yeah.
yeah, so in this new code, they would be allowed to have accessory dwellings subject to the HP guidelines that they still have.
Mhm. The HPs, they don't have an R1, they just have HP. But there's, if you're in an, we have two types of historic areas. One is HP, and that's just your base zone. And the other one is historic landmark, like Jefferson Park is a good example. But they still have base zoning like R1, R2, R3, R4. So they could still have it, but any accessory dwelling would have to be reviewed by the Historic Commission.
Right, and we're not tinkering with the historic preservation guidelines in this effort. Whatever those guidelines are would apply to whatever new construction would get built, just like they do now.
As well as UCD, urban conservation districts, the same. We're not tinkering with those. So if there's something in there that wouldn't allow accessory dwelling to be built, then you wouldn't be able to do it there. And then, like we said, we're going to look at all the other areas later. This is just sort of an initial, let's try this first.
Okay, so that's the big picture. I'm sure there are many questions. So Cassidy, I think you will moderate or read us the chat, and Marilyn and I will do our best to answer.
Yes. So this is the point where y'all like just flood the chat and we just have fun with it. But the first question I have right now is from Madeline, and she says, is the lot coverage a limit or a minimum for those like the R base zones right now?
And you answered that question later on, so you don't have to answer that.
Yeah, it's definitely a
The
maximum.
Huh? We answered it.
Yeah, but that just for the planning nerds on the call, when we're talking about the different LUDAs and the different intensities, some guides for downtowns do have a minimum because you're downtown and you need to fill up most of your lot. But in our residential areas, we don't want you to fill up most of your lot.
While we're waiting on other questions, I have a question on the, you can have a 2-story ADU, I see. What if all the other houses on the block are 1-story? Can you still have the 2-story ADU?
Yes, right now in R1, a house, a new dwelling of any sort can be 2.5 stories, 35 feet.
So conversely, if I in my 1-story home, but it's tall, right? Because 1917 homes have that pitch. Could I build a 2-story dwelling
On your property?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you're zoned R1. I haven't.
Oh, no, I am zoned R1. I just, because my house is 1-story, right?
Yeah,
I didn't know if there was.
heaven forbid your house burned down, you could build a 2-story in its place.
Please don't wish
Or
that.
or 2.5 story.
Okay.
But
2.5 stories.
the AD is limited to 25 feet in height, so you wouldn't be able to get that other half story. It could only be 2.
Yeah, and that was intentional. We wanted, because we were limiting the footprint, we wanted people to be able to build on top of, say, a detached garage if they wanted to.
Madeline has also asked, this all sounds great. So who is fighting this and why?
Oh, I wouldn't say anybody's fighting. People are concerned because people, change is always concerning to people. Whenever we roll out anything that we ever do, the neighbors are concerned about traffic, they're concerned about noise. they were concerned about, what did we call them last night? Somebody called it last night. You know, the rogue developer. So, because, well, on one hand, I think a lot of people are fine with it because, as we said, it exists. I mean, almost all of the pictures we've shown you in this presentation are in Oklahoma City. They're in the core. These things exist. But yeah, and I think more and more people are seeing the benefits of the core that doesn't rely on cars, that has been improved with more sidewalks, with more transit, like the new BRT. And I think people can really see how there's value in increasing the density. When we say increasing the density, we're not saying, you know, 5-story apartment buildings. You know, we're saying an additional dwelling on your lot. And even at that point, it's small, so it can only accommodate so many people. So, yeah, but Madeline, if you hear of any, if you hear of concerns, definitely send them our way so that we can work to address them.
Yeah, and the other two things are these, with the baby boomers aging. Where do we put all these people? And we looked at the retirement homes or nursing homes or things that are helpful to older people, or they're way out in urban load. There's really none in the core, and people want to stay. They want to stay where their church is. They want to stay where their families are, their friends forever have been. They don't want to leave the neighborhood. So what do they do? So I think that's another issue that's driving this.
I want to add, I don't personally, as Georgie speaking, I think we absolutely need to have ADUs, and I think the poster is right. However, as the director of Neighborhood Alliance, I think it is behooves all of you to be very, very aware of what's in the ordinance and to make sure that you're thinking it through as to what is it that you can live with and what is there language that you wish that it had. Can you live with street parking? There are some streets in some neighborhoods that are not wide enough for on-street parking if there were 2 cars for this ADU. Can you live with if ADUs were built for the sole purpose of Airbnbs? And so now suddenly you have maybe 5 more Airbnbs in your neighborhood because ADUs were built strictly for profit. That goes against the whole purpose of ADUs. ADUs were created because we have a housing shortage. Part of the reason we have a housing shortage is because of Airbnbs. Those first-time home buyer homes that would be for first-time home buyers are being bought up by Airbnbs, and they're not being used for first-time home buyers. And this might be the same thing. So should they, or could they even be restricted from being licensed for Airbnbs? Do you want a height restriction? From what Lisa just said, that might not be feasible if they're going to be built on top of a garage. Are there other things that you can think of that would make them more? I brought up last night, should they be noticed? Should the neighbors be noticed that within 300 feet that there's going to be one built within your neighborhood? Not so much that you could argue it, but that you just are noticed that this is going to be built there. It might be give even the owner some credence so that the neighbors don't come down on them and say, what are you doing? At least the notice would say this is a permissible use of this land. and this property, and this is what's going to be built there, especially in the first couple of years, maybe in the use of this new ordinance. So think it through clearly in your neighborhood. Look at this ordinance and say, what else could we put in here that might truly affect my neighborhood, my block? Is there some other language that I need to make sure that this is going to keep good neighbors going in out my neighborhood? I live in a 100-year-old home. It's not in a historic preservation neighborhood, but I do worry about what it's going to do to my neighborhood. I brought it up last night with Lisa. Lisa lives in my neighborhood as well. So when she brought up the term module, you could bring a modular, thank you, a modular ADU and prop it down in the backyards of these 100-year-old homes, 80 to 100-year-old homes in our neighborhood. I had pause. I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like that look. So I don't know if we can regulate that at all, but it did give me pause. So I want you to think it through. This is your opportunity. This is your time, not after they're built, not after they're there. It's now to think it through and find out, is there a way to solve any of your concerns or issues? We're not talking about whether or not they're going to be there. We're talking about how are you going to live with them? Is there language that's going to make you be more comfortable with living with them? And it may be that, whether or not they're going to be there, that's up to you. But I want you to really think it through.
Thanks,
And
Georgie.
one thing we didn't mention is that there is a materials section, and the state doesn't really let us dictate what materials are, but we have said that there's no metal, unfinished metal buildings. No.
That makes me happy. Thank you.
And I would say, Georgie made some great points, but for anybody on the call who's not interested in the deep dive into the ordinance text, feel free to just ask questions like, hey, Lisa, I'm really concerned. I haven't read the ordinance. Don't understand what it's saying, but my personal concern is, I don't know, I almost said barking dogs, whatever it is. My concern is, where's the trash cans going to be? What would really bug me is if, whatever it is that would bug you. And we can take that concern and craft a response to it.
And as far as I see another thing about Airbnbs, and that is a concern. We are at the same time as we're doing this, trying to come up with a proposal for changes to the home share ordinance. And of course, you never know, how it's going to get adopted eventually. But one of the things it would be to limit home shares to only 10% of a block. So you couldn't build a whole bunch of ADUs and then Airbnb them. You could only have one or two on a block. Yeah, if that were adopted.
Bree has asked, what would the timeline be for implementation if this were to pass?
Yes, so let me get back to my schedule slide. So Thursday, tomorrow, we're making a presentation to the Planning Commission. It's called the Development Regulations Committee, and we previously presented in November to Planning Commission at a study session. So a study session is like just an informal meeting of the Planning Commission. We presented our ideas, and they were overall very positive. They had a lot of specific questions that we've since addressed that you're seeing now. Anyway, we presented to them tomorrow. Their task is to agree that it is ready to be heard at Planning Commission, and then it would be heard at Planning Commission. It would be heard at 2 meetings, one for introduction and the second for recommendation, because the Planning Commission would recommend it to City Council. And then there would be 3 hearings at city council: introduction, public hearing, and adoption. So, I don't know. So I don't know if they'll recommend it tomorrow that it's ready for planning commission. I hope they do, but I don't know that they will. But I hope we can take it to planning commission in April or May. We have based on our meeting last night and other questions, we have a little more cleanup and resolution to do. So maybe at planning commission by the end of April or May. And then so that'll be a month at planning commission wherever it starts, and then it'll be a 6 to 8 weeks minimum for it to get through city council.
Everyone's getting ADUs for Christmas. While we're answering some questions, I am, as I'm moderating, we are going to release the post survey right now, just so y'all can kind of take it. I know we're at it's 7:27, so there's like 3 minutes really left, but if you have time to stay and kind of ask more questions and listen, you're more than welcome to. If you have to go, we thank y'all so much for your time tonight. But so the survey's up. Jan would like to know when you will be taking this to HP districts. Or talking to HP districts.
Yeah, and we had a big meeting with Heritage Hills last year, and sometime later in 2024, we'll be meeting with the HP neighborhood. Okay. But I don't have a specific date.
Bree said, I know Oklahoma City has a housing assessment about the city's needs. Where can we find it?
I'm going to put it in the chat now, but you can always email me and ask again, but I'm going to put the link.
And up on the screen is Marilyn's contact info. So tomorrow, over the weekend, next week, a month from now, if anyone has questions, concerns, they can email codeupdate@okc.gov, and Marilyn will get the email.
If you go, Google OKC Planning Department and then look for plans and studies, you'll find.
Sorry. Felicia would like to know how this coincides with present HOA rules. I don't believe there's an HOA in UM, is there?
Yes, there is. And I don't think, help me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I think your HOA covenants will supersede these.
Right. Yeah, currently we don't have any. Yes, there's
an HOA in this area.
Okay. The ordinance as drafted does not have any provisions saying that it supersedes. No. So if they're not allowed in your covenant, then they would not be allowed.
Okay.
Which neighborhood, Georgie, just so I know, or
there's the one down on the Chodo down on off of Classen at 26 or something down there.
Oh, okay.
And Jefferson Park has one.
Okay.
I think it's in this area. Some of the Chodos are now.
Yes.
And then our HOAs.
Los Rosas down by Capitol Hill is also an HOA.
Yeah, Los Rosas is also an HOA. Yeah.
Joe is saying this just eliminates the need to go rezone the lot to build the unit. Property owners would still need to file permits with the city to ensure everything will comply with city code.
Yep. Yes, you still need a building permit. If you're renovating an existing non-conforming or building a new, you still need a permit. Just you won't need to rezone.
So in that instance then, right? So if I've got maybe a room above my garage and it maybe doesn't have plumbing or such, I could get that plumbed and I would just need to meet city code.
Yep.
Perfect.
Are there any regulations? I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna point out so we're trying to remove the zoning barrier to doing that, and we're trying to make it not cheap, but less expensive. Like if all Cassidy has to do is plumb in a shower and a toilet and a little kitchenette, and then she's got, you know, a lovely ADU, either for her family or for her to get some rent income, that's a win-win, right? So.
Are there any regulations whatsoever on the utilities? Can they be hooked to the main property or do they have to be separate?
There's no rules. Well, I mean,
Okay.
there are rules, but it can be either.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Alan said that to support the increased housing, he would suggest prohibiting or limiting the use of ADUs for Airbnbs.
Yeah, we have heard that every place we've gone. Yes, noted.
Thank you.
Bree would like to know how often the housing market assessment is completed.
I was just there's a couple of different ones. One is a fair housing one that I was trying to see how often HUD requires that.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I'm pretty sure they're each like every 5 years. We do it because it's a HUD requirement, and then we also did a housing market study and a housing affordability study, and those were completed in 2021. So probably the next one we'll do is 2026.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
So Cassidy, what were the results of your poll?
Oh, yes, the results of my poll. So little better than last night, which y'all had great numbers last night. 100% tonight said after hearing from y'all, they understand, like have a good understanding of what an ADU is. So if anything, we can take that. We also had slightly better results. Okay. After hearing more about the proposed change, are you in favor or against? It looks like you've got 75% are in favor and 25% sure are not, still are not sure. And then that question we like to ask about what you would like to use your ADU for potentially. I just love that question. What kind of use would you plan for it? Guest room. I would utilize it for family dwellings, place for friends and family to stay when visiting. Currently, I have one actually and utilize it for family. And I would, you say guest, so you're safe. I would use it as a dwelling for my daughter attending college or visiting family members.
Great. So, I mean, just lots of real life uses. And I hope people kind of think that through. This isn't just like a random concept. You know, there's real people have real important uses for ADUs. So
I did just get one more question in, Lisa, and it
Uh-huh.
says, can it and I know we had comments right last night. We had some talk about what we could do with parking and street width. And so JD has actually asked, can it include restrictions on parking based on the street width?
Yes, we have been considering that.
Those are good. Yeah, we talked about that last night too, so that was a good suggestion.
Some streets just aren't made for it.
Right.
So,
I have an ADU with the kitchenette and the bathroom, and it's used for storing my extra furniture. So
Oh.
that's what I use it for.
Which is also very important, Georgie.
It is.
It is
It
But
is.
my
extra furniture loves that kitchenette.
right, my detached garage, it's got a workshop component. Like there's the garage, and then somebody built on a workshop, and it's got a sink and a floor drain. And every day I'm like, aren't I halfway to an ADU?
That's right. You are.
you've got the shower right there.
I like all I have to do is put in a
That's right.
little
You
glass
too can store
enclosure.
extra furniture in an ADU.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but it's not legal, so I can't do it. So, and I for
And-
sure can't do it because I'm the assistant planning director. So I
That's
can't do
right.
the illegal
You know the
ADU.
rules. There's no excuse.
And, for those who are unsure, because it's hard to know how many we would get of these, like I said, we had 3 at Planning Commission last week and I think 2 the week before. I mean, you're going to have to meet that 50% lot coverage. So if you already have a big house and other stuff, you're not gonna be able to do it unless you tear down some stuff. So it's not like every single house will have one. And they're not cheap.
Mhm.
So
Right,
it's
yeah,
not
that's a
like
good
everyone
point.
could just go out and put one up.
Yeah, that's because people were asking about the timing and so it's not as though the day it gets passed, the next day there's going to be a whole bunch of building permits in for ADUs because some sites it just won't work. And some sites people will choose to have a larger cabana or something instead of an ADU. I mean, and there's costs. Some people won't have the cash to do it. Some people may or may not be able to get the financing to do it. But the point is to allow it over time. And that's actually, a great solution because then just everybody kind of grows into it. And before you know it, there's twice as many people living on your block, but you didn't even realize it was happening. And something else I try to say in all these presentations that we give is ideally you won't even notice that there's twice as many people on your block or in your neighborhood. But what you will notice is that there's a new coffee shop because now there's a market. Oh, there's a little cute, homemade jewelry store thing on the corner because now there's a market. That
And
the plus
Lisa-
sides of density.
At Lisa, tell them about, so Lisa's an architect, so she educates me on all this kind of stuff that I wouldn't even thought about, but tell them about the pre-war and post-war lot configuration.
Lot designs.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when most of what we've been talking, and part of this example that I showed of the code from the code, this example, this is designed off of a pre-1945 development pattern. So how neighborhoods like mine and Georgie's, like Lincoln Terrace, like Holmes Farm, neighborhoods built in the 20s and 30s. So they're 50 by 140. It's, two 25-foot lots, 140 feet deep. Las Vegas is 3 25-foot lots, but they're long and narrow. They have a consistent setback. And so because they're long and narrow, so the garages are detached. There were no such things as there are rarely attached garages in pre-1945 homes. So there's always a driveway up the side that gets you to the back. So it's easy to imagine another detached dwelling back there. But other urban medium neighborhoods like Belle Isle, the house spans the width of the lot, right? It's horizontally organized. So, and the garage is attached and it's in the front or to the side. So you can't access the back of the lot. I'm thinking like Mayfair and Belle Isle, they have huge backyards because they're so wide, but you can't even get there in a car. So we have some other diagrams that show how like corner lots and the post-war, the post-1945, 1950 neighborhoods, corner lots are probably best suited for a detached ADU. Otherwise, an attached ADU is probably the most practical option.
You wouldn't even be able to get there unless you were to like burst through the garage and make that a porte-cochere or something. And then
exactly. Yeah, so that's just another nuance, but it would be allowed. Just physically speaking, corner lots are probably the most accommodating.
It looks like I've got 2 more questions in. JD asked, are there thoughts about how many on a lot as long as it doesn't exceed lot coverage?
There's just one.
So 2 houses or 2 dwelling units, right?
Two dwelling.
Okay. So, and then Trimitra's actually is a great question. I haven't seen this one before. And I've been to many of these. Any thoughts in regards to insurance? With homeowners insurance increasing, is this going to be an issue?
It's definitely going to factor in if somebody's deciding whether to build it or turn their garage into one? Yes, it's going to be part of the market consideration. And how much you think you can rent it for versus what the expenses are.
I just want to caution Lisa and Marilyn that please make sure that you correlate the Airbnb, the short-term rental ordinance with this ordinance, because I would hate for people to build or make plans at least to build, if not go ahead and build an accessory dwelling unit for thinking they're going to use it as an Airbnb, and then the ordinance for Airbnb come out and be
And then
told
they're
that
not
they
able
can't.
to,
Yeah. So make sure that those are correlated well, so people
Sure.
don't do that.
Okay.
Other than that, if there are no other questions,
All
I
right.
think, thank y'all so much, everyone, for coming
you,
tonight.
everyone.
Lisa and Marilyn, thank you so much for the last 2 evenings. It's been very informative.
Thanks,
love it.
everyone. Thanks, everyone, for
I
coming. I
love
know
it when
this is,
neighbors come out and you're civically minded and you want to learn more about your city and how it affects your neighborhood. I appreciate that, and I love that for you, and thank you so much for coming.
The following questions and discussion comes from our first evening of Cracking the Code on ADUs in the Urban Core, which was held on Tuesday, March 2nd. Perfect. So the first question I have, and go ahead, y'all, just start sending your questions in the chat. I promise we'll get through them. The first question we have is, what about tiny home communities?
and that's something else that we'll be looking at in the code update. I mean, you can build a tiny home as you want on your own property. It's just that the smallest the lot can be right now is 6,000 square feet, so it's not very efficient to build a tiny home, but you're allowed to build a tiny home as long as it meets the fire and the building code. But
There's
we
no
would,
maximum size of home.
yes,
I mean,
the
yeah,
only maximum.
minimum size, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So but we would like to, a lot of people have asked about kind of the cottage court communities, and we do have also some of those in the core, and we'd like to see more. And so when we get to the bigger process, we would love to, yeah, have some of those where they can be accommodated.
Andrea said that she would propose if the main structure is 35 feet to allow the ADU to be the same height. Is there a reason for why y'all didn't?
Yes, we heard from several people. They were worried, neighboring properties were worried about people peering over. And so that's one reason we reduced it. That said, people could peer over now because you can be at 35 feet, 2.5 stories, and you could be within 10 feet of the rear property line. So that was just a judgment call on our part to try to alleviate that concern. Especially, yeah, and that was kind of related to the balconies and rooftop decks, just to try to provide some extra privacy protections, but noted that we had support for 35 feet.
David is asking what the timeline is for reaching out to historic neighborhoods. Oh, and Lindsay Peaver, who I believe is with Edgemere Park, has asked, who have you spoken with in the HP neighborhoods?
Yeah, so we met with Heritage Hills, and I think at the Heritage Hills annual meeting last January, so January 2023, and they had a lot of concerns, and we just haven't circled back to the other neighborhoods yet. It's gotten not that it's not important, just because HP neighborhoods are a relatively small percentage of the urban core. We prioritized our time on where we thought we could have the biggest impact.
Dara said, years ago, I recall there was a couple who put a tiny home on a lot in the city and then they were told they couldn't be there. My apologies, don't understand what is possible.
What was the last part of the?
They don't understand what is possible.
Oh, I think I know what case they're talking about. Some tiny homes are on trailers and they're pre-manufactured and they're actually mobile homes, technically speaking. They don't follow the building code. And those types of construction are not allowed except for certain zoning districts. So for if I'm thinking of the same case, they had built theirs without licensed persons, specifically licensed electrical persons, so they couldn't meet building code, they couldn't get inspections, and so that's why that wasn't allowed. But in terms of a tiny home like the ones out at Pivot, they're on a foundation, they conform to building code, so those can absolutely be built just about anywhere in the city. It's the ones with the trailers that are not.
Okay.
Like Tiny House Nation, those can't.
Commissioner Privet, I believe, is trying to get out of work on Thursday because he asked if this is the same presentation you will be giving at the study session.
It's the one at Planning Commission will be a little more technically detailed. This was made for a more general audience, but yes, this is the basic information. Thank you, Commissioner.
They'll see you Thursday. Carmen is wondering about the increased street parking.
Wondering if there would be an increase in street parking. We I don't know, maybe, I mean, streets are available, public streets are available to park on. Like Marilyn was saying, we didn't want to add to the expense of doing an accessory dwelling by requiring parking, especially if we're talking about if the market for accessory dwellings is people who need a more affordable option, being able to get around by walking or biking or motorcycle. I mean, that's a pretty attractive option. So if people believe that's a concern, we would love to hear more about what impact they think that might have on their neighborhood.
David says, under the proposed code, if the main building on the property is a duplex, would it allow for a second duplex on the property? I'm concerned about the height limit.
For this existing code that we've just described, you would not be able to have an accessory. You would not be able to have two duplexes. You wouldn't be able to have a duplex and an ADU. You wouldn't be able to have 3 dwellings. You would just be able to have 2. Does that answer that question?
I hope so.
Let me know and re-ask it if I didn't capture it all.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what does it mean? He's concerned about the height limit, David. What does that mean?
I think he's concerned about the 25 feet if there was a secondary duplex in the back, but if there's not if the secondary duplex is not able to be built. Oh, hold on. Yes, that was correct. You got it.
Okay.
So that the 25 feet would be too high or too low?
Well, I think the question, oh, he's answering again. Oh, too low. Got it.
I'm sorry, too high or too low?
Too low.
Okay, so somebody already voiced 35 is maybe
Yeah.
better, and now we're hearing 25 might be too low. Okay.
I think he was asking if there was a second duplex behind the duplex that 25 would be too low. But if you
In other
can't,
words, like one on top of the other might be too low.
yeah.
Oh,
And we looked at a bunch of them and measured their height, and we really couldn't find any that were. I mean, most dwellings are not 35 feet. Most older ones, they're really between 16 and 25 feet, unless it's you know, like this one could be, I forgot what we measured this was. It might be 20.
Yeah, because this yellow one
or-
is the one we based a lot of it on.
Yeah, these are the 24. Well, the yellow one's 21 and the white one's 24. So,
and this one back here by the red door, this one back here, you can tell it's pretty low because the garage door, you know, is 7 or 8 feet. So,
yeah, I think garage doors today are a little bit higher, right?
yeah, and I
Like
would,
9 feet.
yeah, and we don't have to discuss it in detail, but if somebody could put in the chat or email any one of us about, you know, what about the 25 feet would you not be able to achieve? Like what about it makes it too short? Is it because you can't get the roof style you want? Is it because you can't get 10-foot ceilings on the ground floor? Is it because you don't have enough room for mechanical systems? That would be very helpful information for us to know what you're trying to accommodate.
Somebody says, say Andrew says, while not directly related to ADUs, is there thought given to existing trees as in maintaining them with this?
The current proposal does not have a provision requiring people to maintain trees. We did talk about that at various points. That got into, you know, are we able to assess the condition of the tree? You know, we talked earlier drafts. Marilyn was an advocate. Earlier drafts had requiring people to plant new trees.
And then it
But again, relative to, well, there were a couple of issues. One, it's like, well, what if somebody really didn't have room for a tree? You know, what if there wasn't a, what if it was too cramped and it died anyway? What's the sense in requiring it? You know, how would we assess the health of existing trees on the lot? Then the person applying, they would have to get some sort of survey of the tree. So yes, for sure. Plan OKC talks about beefing up our landscaping requirements. The whole of the new zoning code will have more robust landscaping requirements. It'll capture some aspects of tree preservation without question. We didn't go that far here.
And right now the code requires 1 tree in R1, say 1 tree per lot. And so the question was, well, if you're going to put another house, should you require a second tree? But
And Lisa or Marilyn, this is Georgie. I agree with Marilyn there. We don't, as the city, we do require 1 tree per, you know, on a new house. And we don't do any kind of checkup to make sure that tree is doing well and that they're maintaining it or anything. We just hope that it is. And the hope is that at least we've done our due diligence and tried to get a tree in the city, that they're going to maintain it if they spent the money on putting it in there, and that we check to make sure that that tree was actually planted. And I do think it's a good way to reforest our inner city and to add, if they're going to get an ADU, it's a good way to require you also have to put in a tree unless they can prove that there is absolutely no place to put a tree, or it's going to interfere with lines or with above lines or something. I think it's a great idea. That's my personal opinion.
No, thank you.
Kara had 2 comments that kind of went side by side. She said she would like to see parking required because street parking becomes an issue, especially on narrow streets. And then she asked if a fire truck could get through if there was parking on both sides of a narrow street, because she's driven through the plaza with cars on both sides and it's a tight passing with the cars. Anyone?
No, I was making a note, but
Yeah, you're fine.
we will look at that. I know on my street, sometimes people will park right across from each other and you're like, but the fire truck can't get through. I need to check what the rules are, if people are supposed to be mindful of leaving room for the fire truck. We did at various points, we looked at, so another detail of the code update is that we are trying to organize different types of development on different types of streets. So, you know, busier streets would have bigger, busier development, quieter streets would have slower, quieter development. And we did look at should your street type drive, whether or not you needed an ADU. So wider streets, you know, maybe you don't need on-site parking. Narrower streets, maybe you do. But I think in that, Marilyn, we found most streets are, you had a typical width, the right of way.
Yeah, most streets are
60.
Well,
That's
at
the
least
way.
somewhere between 22, like 11 feet per driving width per lane, say.
I was
So
gonna say, I
it's
know
anywhere from 22 to 26 feet.
The pavement width.
The pavement width, yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, I know, as y'all know, my neighborhood streets are a little more narrow. So, so I could see that. Adelia,
But yeah, well, your comment is noted. Thank you.
sure, thank you. Adelia wants to know what the minimum square footage is allowed for an ADU. I think she might mean maximum, but it could be minimum or maximum.
There,
Yeah, definitely the minimum, because just so we don't get in between it
Okay.
being a tiny home and a ADU.
yeah, the minimum is just what you have to satisfy building code. And that just has to do with, you know, your door swings and your bathroom size. So there really isn't a minimum. Other than what you need to make it functional and have code required clearances for various things.
Yeah, you just have to meet building code for what is a habitable space, and
Right.
it, you know, that's kind of all complicated stuff that the permit department deals with. But in general, it seems like you sort of have to be about 350 square feet to meet.
Yeah, that's
that,
that's
like-
generally about as small as you can get,
Okay.
which is pretty
Thank you.
small. I mean,
Yeah, which you could do still, but you just have to meet those requirements for, you know, the width and the depth of a room and height.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Looks like Andrea was wondering if, and this is the last like question I have right now, but it says maybe put those no parking zones on those tight streets.
Yeah.
And then it looks like Dara said some of the pivot tiny houses are smaller, I think.
And what we're saying in this ordinance would be that the buildings they have to meet building code, and they have those modular ones, you know, that you can order and put together, and that's fine. Those meet building code, but it was the manufactured housing meets another federal code, not the city building code. And so anything that meets city building code is okay.
And then I'm sorry, I got ahead. The no parking zones on the tight streets.
Yes.
yeah, I know.
Do we have to go to traffic commission to get the?
Yeah, we have to go to traffic commission, but that's might be something we can incorporate.
Mhm.
Well, this is Georgie again. Will people within 300 feet get a notice on this when they apply?
Well, we're the notice will be so this isn't, well, that's a good question. This isn't rezoning anybody.
Right.
So
I mean, I don't get a notice if I don't get a notice if a neighbor builds onto a house right now.
Yeah, no, if we pass this ordinance and somebody was gonna build an ADU, you would not get a notice, because it would just be allowed. But a good question is how noticing for this ordinance.
Right, and we will confirm that. But Georgie, a good point you bring up is so many of you have been at other things that Marilyn and I have led, and it is one of our challenges is to explain to people why they need to be paying attention to stuff at this point, at this development point, because it could get, by the time it's all said and done, it could be allowed and you would not get notice. And that's why we're trying to communicate to people, hey, you know, here's what we're proposing. If there's something that's giving you pause, we need to know about it now, because a goal of the whole entire code update project is to allow the good and easy things to be easy to do, and to not require separate processes for approval, and not require a public meeting every time somebody wants to do an accessory dwelling. We want to be able to say, you know, the collective we've been so intentional and thoughtful with our accessory dwellings ordinance that we've satisfied all the concerns, and we are confident it can be allowed by right without individual noticing, without separate application processes.
So I have one last question, and then before everyone leaves, we're going to offer we'll offer it as the question is being answered. Carmen would like to know if the ADUs would match the main dwelling in styles, materials, etc. And I am also going to release this last batch of survey.
Yeah, thanks. I forgot about the end survey. Yeah, Carmen, no, we are not requiring the accessory dwelling to match the style or materials. Other people have asked that, so we've debated it. There were two main concerns from staff's perspective. One is sometimes you don't want it to match. Sometimes, you know, the existing house may have just a really, you know, unsightly veneer. It may be the existing house may be the sore thumb outlier of the neighborhood. You know, say, you know, maybe it's the stone house in the middle of a you know, wood siding neighborhood. You know, does that make sense to make people do their ADU out of rock? You know, not sure. And again, we didn't, like, if somebody lives in a Tudor revival, does that mean the accessory dwelling needs to be Tudor revival? You know, what's enough? You know, is that roof pitch? Is it window shape? Is it cladding? Because we have to make the rules to where staff can enforce them. And we felt that getting into style, other than in HP, but getting into style was maybe a step too far. But if you have other specific suggestions, please send them in.
And there's another little Oklahoma law that doesn't really
right, I forgot about
allow
that.
us to, in R1 zones, dictate building materials.
That
We
doesn't
could
allow-
maybe get around it, but
It does not allow.
it does not allow us to. We've been trying to figure out ways to, you know.
Again, this is Georgie, and I promise I wasn't the one that asked that last question, but it gave me pause when you said something about modular housing could be used as an ADU. When I think of modular housing, and forgive me, I'm nowhere near a housing expert at all, but is that like trailer house looking? What is modular housing? So how could we? Is there any guidelines on what that kind of housing would look like behind the housing and visible in our neighborhoods?
I'm looking at Marilyn. She's like.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna let the architect do that,
Well,
but it isn't back in the beginning. We had some pictures where any of those could be. I mean, modular. A lot of times you can't tell the difference between the two.
Okay.
They're just ones that sort of come
Just prefab and kind of,
prefab and put together. You know, the other reason for not having the manufactured house because it doesn't meet building code, but also you would probably need some kind of crane or something to lift that thing into the backyard. So with a modular, you can just, you know, put together in pieces, but
okay.
but they all any modular has to meet building code. So
It just kind of cringed me when I thought about my 100-year-old home and my neighbor's 100-year-old home having a modular home behind them. So
yeah,
that just
Yeah.
kind of,
yeah, and part of why we staff felt we could flex on the materials and the style is these are supposed to be accessory. They're supposed to be smaller, shorter, behind. You know, the front house is where the character statement of the neighborhood is. So for what that's worth, that's where we were coming.
How do I ask a question?
Oh.
I just unmuted. I can't find the group chat.
Oh,
Okay.
do you just want to ask it since you've
Yeah,
unmuted?
go ahead.
that's fine, Alice, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we have an example of something like this was done illegally in our own neighborhood. It was a house, and then they added on what was quote a garage, which turned into an apartment. And so now the main house is used for an Airbnb, and that might not even come under your restrictions, but it's certainly something to think about because the owner lives in the garage part, what was a garage. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself again.
Yes, Marilyn and I are also working on updates to the home sharing ordinance. And those will be forthcoming soon. But yeah, if somebody has an accessory dwelling, they would have to meet the process for home sharing, which entails other things.
Well, and it appears Andrea just asked that earlier, and her last comment was, can Airbnbs actually just not be permitted in the ADUs?
We could accept them.
So,
And what is your concern about them not being used as an ADU? I mean, that ADUs not be used as a home share.
oh, I don't, that was just her comment was just.
No,
can
no,
they-
I'm asking, is she still?
Yeah. I don't, I'm just, if the goal is to make more affordable housing in the
Right,
city
right.
core, and you build these and then make them not accessible to people who live in the core, it seems to defeat the purpose of doing this in the first place. And then it would increase traffic and, you know, more people coming and going and, you know, less community feel, more transient feel.
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
So, I have our post-presentation question results now. And it looks like great news, after hearing from city staff, 92% of y'all feel you have a good understanding of what an ADU is, and 8% of you are unsure. And then it looks like after hearing more about the proposed change, it looks like 38% of you are in favor, 8% are against, and 54% of you are unsure. And then it looks like if you had an ADU, what would you like to use it for? Looks like rental probably in complementary style to offer housing to someone in need. As a senior citizen, I would live in the ADU and rent my own home. Rental apartment, college student housing. Many homes in my neighborhood have existing rooms above the garage. Mine has an existing room with a bathroom non-working, but no kitchen. Tiny house, mother-in-law, granny flat or college rental. I like my privacy. I want birds in my backyard. I don't want an ADU on my property. My favorite is somebody said housing for family due to obnoxious housing costs.
Yeah, and again, just to hit one point of that, yeah, this wouldn't require anybody to do it. It would just allow it to be done. But those are great. That's great info.
It is. And then I'm looking at the original data, and it looks like we are at, oh, it's not giving me a total number. It looks like we had where did it go? It looks like the prior survey that we offered earlier, for a side-by-side comparison. It looks like before only 67% of y'all had a good understanding of what an ADU was. 29% of you were unsure, and 5% were, or no, 29% said no, 5% were unsure. And it looks like there are now, in the beginning, we had 38%, it's about the same. So 38% said that they were in favor, 10% said they were against, and 52% of y'all were unsure in the beginning. So we've gotten the same amount in favor, a little less against, and then it seems like about the same amount is still unsure if they would be for or against.
All right, we thank you, Lisa and
You're welcome.
Marilyn, very, very much. I
thank
know
y'all.
you've put a lot.
Lisa,
work.
can you show the slide of has the contact, or can we send?
Oh, yes. Hold on one second. I had closed it. Sorry.
I'll just put in the chat.
But yeah, so if anybody has, if, tomorrow or the next day, you realize, hey, what about this? Or, hey, I had another idea. Sorry, I can't, it says I'm screen sharing, so so, okay. If you have more questions or have some more ideas going, tomorrow, the next day, or the next several weeks, don't hesitate to reach out to Marilyn. Here's her email, code update at okc.gov. Just send her questions and suggestions, opinions, because this is how we get to what I was describing earlier as a process for ADUs that has a broad agreement that's had everybody's input into what makes it good for the neighborhood.
And in that website, you can sign up for emails to get notifications of things, and as we go through not only the ADUs but the whole code update process.
And if you just didn't have enough today, I mean, you can come back and do this with us again tomorrow.
And Wednesday.
And Thursday at City Council, or sorry,
Planning Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Planning Commission.
Yeah, the Planning Commission meeting. It's at 420 West Main in the basement, right? Marilyn, it's in the basement.
Yeah, it just does our
study
development, a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and then later, hopefully in April or May, it would go to the full Planning Commission. So, at City Hall, so you could come to the hearings and stuff.
At the subcommittee on Thursday, will they be taking questions from the attendees?
Typically.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect.
Thank you for doing your civic due diligence and coming out and learning more. Thank you.
Okay, good night, everyone.